I'm Dr Lara from Only Passing Through Charity. It's the end of June 2025. So Ukraine's just been through some of its worst nights ever since the full-scale invasion began. So the last few nights there's been hundreds of Iranian-made Shahed drones and dozens of Russian missiles raining down on sleeping civilians across the country. And at the same time, the US president's been standing at the G7 summit and expressing sympathy, but not for the people of Ukraine, but for Vladimir Putin. He claimed that if Russia hadn't been kicked out of the G8 in 2014, maybe this war wouldn't have even started. But that's when Russia started the war, that's why they got kicked out. But this is the world we're living in now, a world where the aggressor is framed as the victim, where a brutal dictator is getting more understanding than the families burying their children. And Ukraine, still holding the line, still resisting and still waiting for the world to do more than watch. So the attacks have just been relentless, and the attacks on civilian areas, despite what people say or despite the lack of coverage in the news, have just increased dramatically. So civilian deaths are up 50% on 2024, and it's only June, it's only halfway through. And they've been using things like cluster munitions and chemical weapons, all sorts of things that are actually illegal. Feels like the attacks are getting worse every day. Every day they seem to break a new record for the number of drones and missiles hitting civilian areas. Alerts are popping up on my phone constantly, and it's, on cities I've been in, cities I have friends in. It's just horrendous. I can't even imagine what it's like for Ukrainians. And all the time, Putin smirks, the world hardly bats an eyelid. But this isn't just a war, it's been an endless string of atrocities. So just recently in this so-called peace deal where they exchanged prisoners of war and bodies, they did independent autopsies of the Ukrainian prisoners of war who'd been returned, and they showed missing organs, pulled fingernails, signs of severe torture. In Kherson, mass graves are still being found, women with their hands tied, executed, assaulted. There are hundreds of children confirmed dead, probably tens of thousands more that we don't know about in occupied areas or in mass graves that can be seen by satellite, and tens of thousands more injured and abducted. This is systematic and deliberate. It's not collateral damage. And there's been endless horrific stories, even terrible things that the Russians are doing to themselves and to their own people. Intercepted calls about cannibalism, torture of fellow soldiers by commanders, horrific punishments if you don't go forward to fight in these meat waves. And in the recent exchange of the bodies of prisoners of war, the Russians had handed over some of their own soldiers' bodies as well. Some were identified by DNA, but some came with their ID, and their families weren't even told that they were missing. So imagine being a doctor in Ukraine right now. Some are having to work in bomb shelters with no electricity. You're hearing drones and air raid sirens constantly. Your ambulance, marked, it still gets hit. Over 180 deliberate attacks on medical infrastructure in the last few months alone. Our partners in the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine, they hear daily of the desperate needs in the medical sector and the health services. Russia is making it dangerous just to survive, even more dangerous to help others survive. But the medics haven't stopped, and neither have we or our partners. That's why it's so important that we stand with them. Now, here's something most Australians don't know. Through a sanctions loophole, Australia has become one of the world's biggest indirect funders of Putin's war. Yes, that's right. We are funding the bombs. We import refined oil from third countries like India and Turkey, who originally get it from Russia, and Russia collects taxes on every drop of it. So at least 1.85 billion has gone to the Kremlin this way in the last year, I think. Some figures put it at 5.5 billion since the beginning of the war, but it's either way more than we've given Ukraine in aid. It's disgusting. So each time we fill our car, we're helping pay for the bombs, we're helping fund the slaughter, and it needs to stop. So the Australian Federation of Ukrainian Organisations has launched a campaign to close this loophole, and at OPT we're backing it 100%. You can go to this blog post and there you'll find a link on how you can write to your MPs and do something about it. So meanwhile, the lies and the hypocrisy just get more and more stunning by the moment. Putin announces that he's struck military targets with great precision, and then we see the pictures of the blown up apartment blocks with the pregnant women being dragged out of them. Explain the playground. Explain the children killed while playing outside. On 17th of June, a missile hit a Kiev apartment building. 28 civilians dead from one building, over 100 injured. Russia calls this demilitarization, but what we're seeing is dehumanization. And Putin says Ukrainians are one people with us. So why kill them? Why steal their children? Why destroy their homes, churches and schools? The truth is Russia doesn't want to liberate anyone. It's erasing them. And yes, in the last few days, it's hardly caused a stir that the dictator Putin has claimed that all of Ukraine is theirs and uses the same imperialistic language that Hitler used when wanting to conquer all of Europe. Russia has made it blatantly clear they are not interested in peace. So why is no one listening? Why are there still sanctions to even be had? Why are so many of us still funding this genocide and destruction? And let's just take a moment to zoom out. So Russia isn't just fighting a war in Ukraine. Wherever there's death and destruction, you will almost surely find Russia's hand in it. It's got strong alliances with authoritarian regimes, Iran, North Korea, China, others like Belarus, Venezuela, and formerly Syria. Iran supplies Russia with deadly Shahed drones, the same ones raining down on Kiev. North Korea sends artillery and soldiers. China supplies drone parts and components used in weapons. Meanwhile, Iran, Russia's ally, funds and arms Hamas and Hezbollah, terrorist groups, with a long history of calling for the destruction of Israel, America, and the West. Russia is also heavily involved in Africa. It's supporting the RSF in Sudan, exchanging weapons for resources with warlords, and seeking increasing military and economic expansion in Africa. Russian mercenaries like the Wagner Group have been implicated in war crimes and atrocities across Africa. And in fact, some of the worst suffering in the world right now is actually in Sudan, caused by this horrific conflict that is being funded by Russia. And then there's Gaza. Russia's propaganda machine lights up during every escalation. They amplify pro-Gaza rhetoric, they push divisive narratives and inflame anti-Western sentiment, especially in Africa, Latin America and Southeast Asia. But why? Why would they do that? Because regional chaos distracts from their war crimes in Ukraine. It fractures Western unity. Their allies are then less likely to get behind Ukraine and support them and agree on things. It spikes oil prices, which helps Russia to survive sanctions and pay for this war. And some intelligence sources suggest possible links between Russia, Hamas and Iran in the lead up to the October 7th attacks. So whether direct or indirect, the benefits for Russia of all this chaos at the moment are undeniable. So while the world gets distracted, Russia continues its invasion, continues its crimes, and continues to manipulate the global narrative. So the world has promised so much, but weapons are delayed, sanctions are half-hearted, leaders are hesitant. America has probably all but pulled away. Ukraine is fighting alone on the front lines of a war that affects all of us. The global response has been slow, inconsistent and weak with a few exceptions. And while the world debates, Ukraine bleeds. Every day that passes without action is another day where the Kremlin sees how far they can push without consequence. How long do we think this will stay in Ukraine? What we allow in Ukraine sets the precedent for what others will try elsewhere. This matters. And yes, I'm sorry, this is overwhelming. It is horrific. And I know you probably want to just turn away right now. You feel powerless, but you're not. Most of us can't stop missiles, but we can support those affected. We can help those risking everything to stand up to evil. Grassroots Ukrainian NGOs and volunteers are delivering aid. You can speak up, write to your MP, ask for more support, ask them to close the sanctions loopholes that means we are funding Putin's war. Help us to help them. Medical aid, humanitarian relief, real impact. You can donate at www.passingthrough.net/support. At this page you can also find out about other ways that you can contribute if you want to volunteer. And please know that 100% of funds go directly to those in need. We are all volunteers. And your donations are tax deductible. All donations over $2 in Australia have a tax deduction. Please stand with Ukraine. So much depends on it.